My wife cheated on me with our realtor during the sale of our $1.2 million home. Then I found out she secretly transferred $500, $0 to her sister to hide assets. Now we're headed to court over everything, and I feel like I've lost my mind. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew my wife, Jessica, pretty well. We'd been married for 8 years, built a life together, had a couple of kids, and I thought we were solid. But then, out of nowhere, everything started to feel off. Small things at first, her phone ringing at odd hours, her being unusually secretive about her texts, and a strange tension that hung in the air whenever she was around me. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was stressed or busy with work. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It all hit me one day when I was going through the paperwork for the sale of our house. We were selling our $1.2 million home, a property we'd poured years into, and I was just trying to get everything organized. That's when I noticed something strange. Transfer of $500, $0 to her sister's account. I knew Jessica was ambitious, but this was a huge amount of money. It wasn't part of the sale proceeds, and I'd never authorized anything like that. I remember staring at the bank statement, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Why would she do that? And more importantly, where was all the money going? I kept digging, trying to piece things together. That's when I found out she'd been secretly transferring money behind my back for months. I confronted her about it, asking her what the hell was going on. Her face went white for a second, and then she started to spin this bullshit story about needing to help her sister out, that her sister was in some kind of financial trouble. I didn't buy it for a second. Why hide it? Why not tell me? The more I pushed, the more she started to get defensive, throwing up these lies about how I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, and that I didn't trust her. That's when I saw the real Jessica come out, bitchy, cold, and dismissive. It was like talking to a stranger. But the worst part, that wasn't even the biggest shock. It wasn't just the money. I later found out she'd been cheating on me during the sale process, had an affair with the realtor, Mark. Apparently, they'd been sneaking around for months, right under my nose. I discovered it by accident, seeing messages on her phone, late-night calls, and a strange scent on her clothes after she claimed she was working late. When I confronted her, she everything, laughed it off, called me paranoid, said I was imagining things. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the lies, the way she avoided eye contact. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd always thought we had a good marriage, that we were in this together. Turns out I was the only one who believed that. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, had been lying to my face, cheating, and secretly funneling money to her sister. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My world was crashing down around me. I didn't sleep that night, just lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could have gone so wrong. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? I was furious and heartbroken all at once. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next few days were a blur of rage, confusion, and a growing sense of helplessness. I couldn't focus at work. My mind kept circling back to her lies, her betrayal, the money, and the affair. Every time I tried to piece together what she'd been doing, I felt this intense burning in my chest, like I was about to explode. Jessica, of course, played it cool, acting like nothing was wrong, throwing out little jabs about how I was overreacting or how I was blowing things out of proportion. She tell me I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that she loved me and only me. But I knew better. I'd seen her phone, her messages, the way she'd been sneaking around with Mark, our realtor. It was all right there. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I sat her down in the living room, tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my hands trembling. I told her I knew everything, the money, the affair, the lies. Her reaction was classic Jessica, defensive, dismissive, and with that unmistakable sneer that made my stomach turn. She told me I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that Mark was just helping her with the sale, that she'd never cheat on me. She even went as far as to call me insecure, jealous, and said I was ruining everything because I didn't trust her. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I could see through her bullshit. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I was losing my mind. Parts of me wanted to scream, to accuse her of everything, to throw her out and never look back. But another part, more rational, knew I had to handle this carefully. I was hurt, yes, but I also knew I needed to protect myself and my kids. Still, the betrayal cut so deep. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband, a loyal man. And now, I was faced with the fact that the woman I trusted most in this world had been lying, cheating, and secretly stealing from us. The thought of her with Mark, of her sneaking around behind my back, made me feel sick. I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly in the chest. I started to question everything, our marriage, her love, whether I even knew who she was anymore. The money she transferred to her sister, that was just the tip of the iceberg. It was clear she'd been hiding things for a long time, and I felt so betrayed I didn't know what to do. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. I thought about the life we built, the vacations, the family dinners, the quiet nights. Everything now seemed tarnished. I kept replaying all her lies and the moments I'd ignored the warning signs. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to realize you're still trapped in it. That night I stayed up until dawn, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. I was angry, so angry I could taste it. But beneath that, there was a deep sadness. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had turned into someone else entirely. I wondered how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could betray me after all these years. I questioned everything, my judgment, my instincts, my marriage. The trust was shattered. I knew I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. I had to decide what to do next. But honestly, I didn't have a clear plan yet. All I knew was that my world had been turned upside down and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out whether I could rebuild or if I should just walk away. After that night, everything felt different, like I was living in someone else's life, not my own. I started to gather evidence, trying to get a clear picture of how deep the betrayal went. I couldn't just sit around waiting for her to slip up again, so I installed a few apps on her phone, checked her bank statements more carefully, and even tried to follow her without her noticing. It was all about trying to understand just how far she'd gone, how much she'd lied, and what her endgame was. One thing I kept coming back to was the money transfer. Why hide $500,000? That's not small change, and it wasn't just about helping her sister, at least that's what she claimed. I had a gut feeling she was hiding something bigger, maybe trying to shield assets from me, or maybe she was planning some kind of escape. I also realized she'd been lying about her whereabouts during the sale, claiming she was working late when I caught her sneaking out to meet Mark. The more I looked, the more I saw a web of lies that she'd spun around herself. The day I found out about the affair was the worst. I was at work when I got a message from a friend, someone I'd confided in about the house sale and her strange behavior. He'd seen Jessica with Mark, holding hands, laughing like they were the only two people in the world. I felt like my stomach dropped out of my body. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me, to us? I remember staring at my phone, feeling numb, then a wave of anger washed over me. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I also knew I needed to plan my next move carefully. When I got home that evening, I was a mess. I waited until she was alone in the kitchen. Then I dropped the bomb. I told her I knew about her affair with Mark, about the money, everything. Her reaction. She looked me dead in the eyes and lied straight to my face. Said Mark was just a client, that I was jealous and insecure, that I was making everything up. She even started crying, trying to manipulate me into believing she was innocent. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I could see through her tears, through her lies. This was a woman who had been cheating, stealing, and lying for months, and I had the proof. The confrontation turned ugly fast. She called me crazy, said I was paranoid, and accused me of overreacting because I didn't trust her. I told her she had no right to call me paranoid when I had the evidence, when I'd seen her with my own eyes. That's when she snapped, calling me controlling, accusing me of trying to ruin her life. It was like talking to a stranger, her eyes cold, her voice sharp. She kept denying everything, but I knew the truth. It was in her body language, her tone, her eyes. She'd been lying to me for so long that I wondered if I even knew who she was anymore. I felt so many things: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. I'd built this life with her, trusted her with everything, and now I was left with nothing but scraps of what we had. I couldn't stop thinking about the money she'd transferred, the nights she'd spent with Mark, the lies she'd told to cover her tracks. It was like she'd been living a double life, and I was just a pawn in her game. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I allowed myself to be blind to the truth. The woman I loved, the wife I thought I knew, had turned into someone I barely recognized. That night I stayed awake again, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her publicly, to expose everything and end this nightmare. But another part, more rational, knew I needed to think carefully. I had to protect my kids, my assets, and myself. I realized that I was at a crossroads: either fight for my marriage and try to salvage what's left, or cut my losses and walk away. I did have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure: my trust was shattered beyond repair. The woman I thought I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. And the worst part, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her, or if I even wanted to. All I knew was that everything had changed, and I was left standing in the aftermath of a betrayal that threatened to destroy everything I held dear. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal consultations, sleepless nights, and emotional chaos. I started to realize that this wasn't just about her cheating or the money transfer. It was about trust, control, and betrayal on a level I never thought possible. I couldn't look at Jessica the same way anymore. Every time I saw her, I saw a stranger, someone capable of lying, cheating, and secretly stealing from me. It was like the foundation of our marriage had been hollowed out, and I was left trying to figure out how to rebuild from the wreckage. I decided I needed to get some clarity, so I started talking to a lawyer. That's when I learned about the legal implications of her transferring such a huge amount of money without my knowledge. It was obvious she was trying to hide assets, probably to protect herself in the divorce or legal proceedings. That realization made my blood boil. I felt like I'd been played, used, and betrayed by the person I'd trusted most. I also found out that her sister was in on it, taking $500,000 in secret. That was the moment I knew I had to act fast. This wasn't just about salvaging what was left. It was about stopping her from doing more damage. Meanwhile, Jessica kept up her act, pretending to be the victim, crying, accusing me of being controlling. She insisted she loved me, that she'd never cheat, and that I was just paranoid. But I'd seen her with my own eyes. I'd read the messages. I knew the truth. Her lies were so blatant that it was almost laughable if it weren't so heartbreaking. I started to gather evidence of her lies, taking screenshots of her texts, saving bank statements, and recording her suspicious behavior whenever I could. It was my way of protecting myself, of making sure I had something concrete to hold onto when I finally decided what to do. One afternoon, I sat her down again, trying to get her to admit the truth. I told her I knew about her affair, the money, everything. Her reaction was a textbook denial. She accused me of snooping, of invading her privacy, of trying to ruin her life. She called me controlling, paranoid, and said I was making her feel trapped. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, knowing deep down that she was just trying to manipulate the situation. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I told her I was done playing her game, that I was going to protect myself and my children no matter what it took. The emotional toll was exhausting. I was furious at her, heartbroken over what we'd lost and scared for what the future held. I questioned everything: our marriage, my own judgment, whether I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. I kept replaying all the moments I missed the signs, all the times I brushed off the weird little things. Now it all made sense. Her secret transfers, her late-night meetings, her lies about her whereabouts. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been living a double life, and I was just a pawn in her game. That night I made a decision. I was done pretending everything was okay. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, waiting for the next lie or betrayal. I knew I had to take control, file for divorce, protect my assets, and make sure she couldn't keep pulling the rug out from under me. It was a painful choice, but I realized I deserved better than this constant deception. I also knew I needed to focus on rebuilding myself, on healing from this emotional wreckage. I couldn't change what she'd done, but I could decide how I responded. That was the only thing I had control over now. As I prepared for what was to come, court dates, negotiations, the uncomfortable process of splitting everything, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with dread. Part of me still loved her, still wanted things to work out. But I knew that trust was gone, and you can't build a healthy relationship on lies and betrayal. I learned the hard way that sometimes the person you think you're with is who they pretend to be. And sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to walk away and start over. I've got a long road ahead, but I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of this dark tunnel. The court proceedings were the most draining experience I've ever gone through. Jessica fought tooth and nail, trying to spin her lies one last time, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I'd fabricated everything out of jealousy. She played the victim, crying about how unfair it all was, how she still loved me and wanted to save our marriage. But I wasn't buying her tears anymore. I'd seen her in her true form, the manipulative, lying woman who'd betrayed me at every turn. The judge wasn't stupid either. After reviewing the evidence, bank statements, texts, witnesses, I could see that the truth was starting to shine through. Jessica's attempts to paint herself as the wronged wife fell flat. The court ordered an audit of her accounts, and that's when everything unraveled further. It turned out she transferred more than just the initial $500, $0. She'd been funneling money for years, hiding assets, and trying to shield her wealth from divorce proceedings. The realization that she'd been secretly stacking her assets, even as she pretended everything was fine, made my blood boil. Meanwhile, Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that she was the victim of my paranoia, that I'd invaded her privacy and broken her trust. But the court saw through the bullshit. They ordered her to return the stolen funds and to disclose all her assets, including the money she'd transferred to her sister. It was a huge blow to her plans, and I could tell she was furious. She kept insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that she was the victim of my distrust. But the judge wasn't buying her lies anymore. The evidence was overwhelming, and I finally felt like I was getting some justice. Throughout all this, I stayed focused on what mattered: my kids, my future, and reclaiming my life. Jessica's attempt to manipulate the court and everyone around her only reinforced my decision to move on. I knew that, no matter how much she tried to spin her story, her actions spoke volumes. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair or the money. It was about her complete disregard for the vows we took and the life we'd built. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, knowing I was finally standing up for myself and my children, but also mourning the loss of the woman I thought I loved. The fallout was intense. Jessica was ordered to pay back the stolen money, and her assets were tied up in court. She tried to appeal, to drag things out, but I refused to back down. I hired a private investigator to make sure I had all the evidence I needed, and I started planning my next steps, getting a new place, sorting out the divorce, and figuring out how to rebuild my life from scratch. In the end, I realized that sometimes the only way to truly move forward is to cut ties completely. Jessica's lies and betrayal had robbed me of my trust, my peace, and years of happiness. But I also learned that I was stronger than I thought, capable of facing the worst and coming out on the other side. I now see that letting go of someone who doesn't value you is actually a form of self-love. I'm not there yet, but I'm finally starting to breathe again, to feel like I can rebuild something better. The pain still lingers, but I know I'll come out of this wiser, more cautious, and more determined to find genuine happiness. Looking back now, I realize that this whole nightmare was a brutal lesson in trust and betrayal. Jessica's actions shattered what I thought was a solid marriage, but in the end, I learned something even more important. I am capable of surviving the worst. I've gone through sleepless nights, legal battles, and a deep emotional upheaval, but I came out the other side still standing. It's funny, when everything falls apart, you start to see what truly matters. Not the material things, not the house or the money, but your own strength and the clarity that comes with realizing who you really are. I've started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I moved into a new place, far away from the chaos and the memories that haunted me. I've also become more cautious about who I trust. I've learned that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the person you love the most can turn out to be the biggest liar. But I also learned that I don't have to let her betrayal define me. I refuse to be a victim forever. Instead, I see this as an opportunity to start fresh, to focus on my kids, and to find happiness on my own terms. The whole experience has made me more wary, but it's also made me more resilient. I've realized that sometimes you have to go through the darkness to appreciate the light. I don't regret standing up for myself or fighting for what's rightfully mine. If anything, I wish I had seen the warning signs sooner, but I also know that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. Now I trust myself more than ever, and I know I'll never let someone's lies or betrayal break me again. To anyone out there going through something similar, be brave. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to walk away if you have to. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. No amount of material wealth or social status can replace genuine love and integrity. I've learned that the hard way. But I also learned that life goes on, and that even after the biggest betrayals, you can find a way to heal and move forward. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it's worth it. I'm finally at peace with myself now. The pain will always be part of my story, but it no longer controls me. I've taken my power back, and I know that whatever comes next, I will face it stronger and wiser than I ever thought possible.